Do you want to be on your deathbed and say, I'm really glad I worked every single weekend and didn't really get to know my kids after they graduate high school?
Today, we're joined by Michael Ceely, business coach for high performers.
We dive into the real psychology behind workaholism, why hustle culture traps so many men, and how to start playing the long game instead.
Alcoholic, workaholic, there's an addiction connotation there. You know that you're a workaholic if you are really actually addicted to work. There's a certain pride in it, especially in our culture, work hard, grind, but there's a price to pay for everything, right? The time you're spending working and not doing the other things that are good for you, there's a price to pay. There's nothing that's free. So if you want to make the sacrifice, don't be in denial about what you're sacrificing. If you've ever played sports, if you had a coach who pushed you, yet also you could tell really cared about you, those are the best kinds of coaches. Similarly, with your own inner critic, it's almost like a persona. If you're respecting yourself at a baseline, like, I get enough sleep, I'm not gonna work this hard, I am gonna take this vacation with my family, like that self-respect. But then at the same time, you get a little spicy and you push yourself and you do some of these sprints and you do work through the weekend. Paying attention to how the inner critic works. Would you treat your friend the same way as you're treating yourself by talking to yourself in this way? So that's a big thing, is getting aware of that self-talk and that inner critic.
What is one thing that they can do right away after listening to this podcast?
Yeah, use your...
Hello, welcome back to the Men's Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Marc Azoulay, and I'm here with Michael Ceely. So he's been on the show before, where we talked about a little about his story and about athletes and performance psychology. So if you're interested in that, check that out in the show notes. We're going to have a link to the first episode. But in this one, we're going to talk about where he's really developing his practice, which is around workaholics, around business coaching, mentorship, and really how to make all this shit work in the crazy world that we live in right now. So Michael, welcome back to the show.
Mark, great to be back.
Let's just dive right in. Like, how do you know if you're a workaholic? That's like the number one question I get from these guys is, maybe their wives are saying they're workaholics, maybe their kids are, they don't really feel like they are, they're not quite sure. How do you know? How do you know if this is happening to you?
Well, let's look at the word, alcoholic, workaholic, right? There's an addiction connotation there. So you know that you're a workaholic if you are really actually addicted to work. You're using it as a way to self-soothe. Maybe you had an argument with your spouse. What do? You work for 5 hours and you feel better, right? Maybe there's a challenge with one of your kids. Instead of dealing with it, you go work harder. You're using it as a drug. You're using it as a way to self-soothe, way more than necessary or normal. So that's the short answer on how you know if you're an alcoholic. Like you said, you might be getting feedback from other people. Hey, you should work less, right? Those are all signs that there's a problem.
You see, it's more of an avoidance behavior. It's not really like a pleasure-seeking behavior, because I think when some people think of like alcoholics or drug addicts, like, oh, they just like really love drugs. There's like a hedonistic quality to it. But I'm hearing, you're going with classical addiction, right? That like it's really a numbing or coping strategy.
More of like a numbing or coping strategy. Certainly, if you're imbibing alcohol, there's some sort of hedonistic pleasure in it. But oftentimes we find that there's something else going on there. There's deep anxiety or something going on where you need to call it self-soothing, right? So it's a form of self-soothing. It's probably better than drinking alcohol, but at the same time, it can be quite destructive because it can hurt relationships. It can actually hurt your health too. So it's a problem. And I think it's a problem for a lot of, I'll say, quote unquote, high functioning people, right? Is that there's a certain pride in it, especially in our culture, work hard, grind, but there's a price to pay for everything, right?
I'm curious about that culture clash, something where I wanted to ask you about is like, how do you know if you're workaholic or just a hustler, or when I talk to some of the dudes that I think are on that line, they often say, my wife or my family or my kids even, like, they don't understand my job. My job demands this. I need to be available all the time. I need to be on the phone, or maybe I'm a business owner. I need to be able to answer emails, at 4 a.m. in the morning. I mean, these are extreme examples, but I think when you're in it, sometimes it feels like that is the only option, that it's not coping, right? That it's not even pleasure or money making. It's like, this is my job. It's just, this is the nature of reality. I think it's hard to tease those things apart sometimes.
Definitely hard to tease those apart. the hustle culture. This is what I need to do. Like you say, I need to be there for my customers 24/7, all of these things. If you're able to have conversations and agreements, I would say, maybe with your spouse or significant other, and you have agreements around your work schedule, that's good. That's a good start. But like I just said, there's a price to pay for everything. So that the time you're spending working and not doing the other things that are good for you, like taking care of your sleep and your physical health and your relationships, there's a price to pay. There's nothing that's free. So if you want to make the sacrifice, don't be in denial about what you're sacrificing, right? I think that's a really good, healthy starting point, because everyone has maybe different sleep needs. Like, for example, I need 7 hours. If I get less than 7, I'm not really firing on all cylinders. And I've realized that. Some people need 4 or 5, like kind of, that would be interesting, but that's not me. So it's being like really honest about what the price that you're paying for your work ethic is actually.
Can you say more about those knock-on effects? I know you mentioned sleep and physical health, but what else is there?
Sleep, physical health, relationships, right? So that relationships need time, they need nurturing. You can have sort of like a maintenance level in your marriage maybe, or maintenance level with your kids or your best friends or whatever. But like, you need to invest. It's almost like putting money like into a stock market portfolio. Like if you're not feeding it, right, it's not going to grow and it can go down. So to get back to that, yeah, there's a price to pay. So like if you want to pay that price, you're not going to have strong relationships. Maybe if you're working all the time, right? And that's just going to be the reality. Do you want that? So you might start asking yourself some deeper sort of existential questions like, do you want to be on your deathbed and say, you know, I'm 100 years old and I'm really glad I worked every single weekend and didn't really get to know my kids after they, got out of high school, graduated high school. Like, it's like going flash forward into like that deathbed scenario. Like, what would you rather have? Would you rather have $1 million less, but you have strong relationships? So when I do my coaching with clients, I always talk about the ROI, like return on investment. So if you're going to work every single Sunday, for example, what is the ROI on that? And what if you took that day off? Or what if you took 2 weekends, I don't know, like a weekend off every month? Like, would you really make that much more money by working an extra 2 days? Because the price you're paying for that is you're going to be losing the strength in relationships. You're going to be possibly losing some of your health. Is that really worth it, right? So like a lot of times, like high achievers can understand that the ROI, right? So even if you think about it, like break it down on a daily, if you worked 30 minutes less every single day, literally, would that really make that much of a difference in your business? Because the grind mentality is like, I get one more client or this or that, but it's almost like a religion, this sort of like grind, hustle mentality. You see it all over social media. But like, what is the actual measurable ROI on working 30 minutes less or 30 minutes more? It's not that big, right? So think about it that way. Like, are you really gaining that much more by just simply being a workaholic? Or is it more like it makes you, it soothes your insecurity, right? Or it soothes comparison syndrome or whatever it is. Like, just so many people need to get to that honest look in the mirror. Like, when I'm on my deathbed, what do I want to be proud of and happy about? Like, do I really want that really nice car over the one that's like also just fine? And then I traded my relationships and my marriage. You got to be honest.
Well, when I hear you advocating, which is really interesting to me, it's a little what I do with my guys too, is like you're advocating business sense, like if they're actually looking at ROIs, they're looking at the margins, right? They're looking at what they're actually producing. Like that makes you a better business owner, say, a small business owner in this case, this example, right? Like to really try to understand your business and try to understand when is it actually strategic to delegate, right? Or strategic to perhaps hire somebody to even scale further, right? So if you're still in that kind of like hustle grind set mentality, it's not just raw hours or raw time. You have to be really strategic about it. So being a better businessman and a better business owner means often working smarter, right? Not harder. not just nose to the grindstone.
Definitely, like you said, like when do I delegate? When I do coaching, especially with a lot of men, it's like they have such high standards that they can't wrap their head around the fact that is actually good enough, right? So it's like, no, I have to do this job myself. I have to, type up this proposal. It's like, you can have your assistant do it and it's going to be fine. But like that business sense, right? Like logically, if you do things, let's say that you're a business owner, the actual goal is to have customers benefit from your product or service, right? And you get paid for it. Like that's the bottom line. So if you're tweaking levels of perfection and workaholism, around 3-4%, and you burn in the midnight oil, is that really going to be affecting the quality of your product or service delivered to the customer and ultimately their happiness? Like I would say no. The ROI again, right, is going to be so low on that. And the price you're paying is your health, relationships. Like it's money or energy coming out of somewhere, like you can't cheat your human body. Like you need relationships, you need sleep, you need to take care of your health. So yeah, again, honesty.
On that thread of honesty, let's go a level deeper. I think you've mentioned a couple of these more unconscious, emotional, psychological motivators. A couple that I heard, I'm curious your thoughts on them, is like you named insecurity. I think you named control in there. You named perfectionism. So I'm curious if you could speak to that, because it's just like with every addiction, right? Like it's not as simple as like work less. And, and I know that, but saying that to our listeners, like the root often runs a lot deeper than that. And the work is just a symptom, or it's just a way of coping with some of these deeper roots. So I'm curious, like, what are some of the deeper roots that you see in the clients that you work with?
Yeah, I mean, it's insecurity. It's the abusive inner critic that comes with, I'm not going to blame everything today on social media, Mark, but the comparison syndrome, so-and-so is crushing it on Instagram. It's like, that's just a highlight reel. So I think a good start is looking at the inner critic. And like we talked about that concept for a second. And it's kind of a buzzword these days, but it's a real thing. So I look at it like this. Being hard on yourself and lighting a fire under your ass, like that can be great. That's a great kind of energy in more like in the short term, right? But if you think of it like, if you've ever played sports, if you had a coach who was pushed you, yet also you could tell really cared about you and respected you and wasn't abusive, right? Those are the best kinds of coaches. Some people have had the misfortune of having an athletic coach who is actually abusive and yells at the people. And like, it might work short term, but like super short term, but then it becomes demotivating. So similarly with your own inner critic, it's almost like a persona, like how you treat yourself and how the self-talk. If you're respecting yourself at a baseline, like I get enough sleep, like I'm not going to work this hard, I am going to take this vacation with my family, like that self-respect. But then at the same time, you get a little spicy and you push yourself and you do some of these sprints and you do work through the weekend. Just paying attention to how the inner critic works. Like, would you treat your friend the same way as you're treating yourself by talking to yourself in this way? That's a big thing. Is getting aware of that, your self-talk and that inner critic. And like, when was the last time you kept a self-talk journal for say a week and just, at the end of the day, writing down how you feel about yourself this day, right? And did you give yourself credit for things? And are you proud of yourself? Or is it all just criticism, right? So this is something to be really aware of, I think.
I mean, that last point is the one I talk to my dudes about, is like, is that critic ever satisfied? Like, if it's never satisfied, if it doesn't really matter what you do, you're never going to impress that person or that inner voice. It's not on your side, right? It's not actually motivating you. It's just a hater, right? It's just someone that is constantly trying to cut you down. And I found with a lot of these guys, it is never enough. I think that leads to the addictive nature, right? The kind of escalation that's typical in substance abuse addictions, where you have to do more to feel the same thing. And it's like you're gonna have these guys that they're gonna close multi-million-dollar deals, and they don't feel anything, right? There's no sense of accomplishment. What they're doing is they're going back and wondering where that extra million was on the table, or wondering how to get the next deal, right? There's no moment of true celebration. It's just empty, right? The whole thing feels very empty and hollow internally.
If we get down to the insecurity, like the word vigilance comes to mind. So a lot of guys I coach, there's this all like hypervigilance around never being satisfied, because if I relax and feel satisfied, I lose my edge. I'm not going to have that killer instinct anymore. And again, if you get logically and measure, like if you measure again, like an extra day of the month, you just take that day off, it's not going to make any difference in your business, or if you're an executive, like it's just not. So that's an angle where in my coaching, I approach it, just get them logically to actually agree that, look, if you take this time off, it is really not going to matter. I mean, it might like a 1% here and there. That's the first step. And then getting people to just go, you know what, like I respect myself. Like I don't need to be this abusive to myself, right? I can reward myself, and I can feel I close this multi-million-dollar deal. Great. Let me go celebrate, right? Because if you don't celebrate, you're training your brain the only dopamine you get is by chasing and closing and then on to the next, right? And that's just no way to live. So it's so easy again to get caught up in the culture, right? Like here's all these people accomplishing these things, and that happiness equals this sort of monetary accomplishment. But again, I'll flash forward to the deathbed. This is where like it makes me think of the movie, gosh, the one where they say Rosebud. Do you know which one I'm talking about? This is Citizen Kane, I believe.
Kane,
it's
yeah.
Old movie.
Yeah.
And it's this, multi-millionaire who like on his deathbed like remembers his childhood. That's what life's about. I mean, really, ultimately, like you're doing all this work for what?
And I think that's the question, right? That we're digging into is like, for what? And you talk about this insecurity, and I feel like a lot of these guys, they want status, right? Or maybe on some level they want love, or they want belonging, or they want to feel safe. And, what makes an addiction, again, that escalation, is that the thing you're doing actually isn't working. Like you're not feeling like your status matters, right? You're not feeling love. You're not feeling belonging. You're not feeling safety. You're not feeling control. So you have to do more and more and more of it, because the brain's stupid, right? The brain basically goes like, it doesn't work. Okay, I need to do the same thing, but harder. It's very difficult for the brain to try a completely new strategy. It's going to do what it finds familiar first. And you can get stuck in those loops. So I'm curious, kind of threading off of that, is like, what are these guys looking for? Is it those things I mentioned? Like what are they trying to get out of having the highest bank account number?
I think it is that. I mean, humans are wired the same. We want validation. We want love. We want to feel like part of a tribe. We want to feel safe in that tribe because we're not going to be abandoned by that tribe. This is all the primal thing. So that part of this is chasing a lot of that peer group recognition, right? I'm going to be recognized by my peer group. They're going to see my prestige, my status. I'm not going to be, at very least, I'm not going to be, excommunicated from the tribe. All right, now I can relax. I got to hit that. So there's a lot of that primal stuff going on. And then also, again, like that inner critic is sort of like this self persona inside. You want to please that, which is almost kind of like a ghost, right? Like I've got to be true to this inner critic of mine who is never satisfied. But ultimately, it's really about wanting love and approval from our tribe, our peer group. That's really, I think, what it comes down to.
I agree with that. I see that so much, right? I see, especially, I was saying before the show, like I work with a lot of startup entrepreneurs, and these are guys that are, maybe had a great idea in college or in grad school or, in their early 20s and built a company around it, right? And I find in that time, belonging, love, connection, family, like that's the main thing you want when you're in your 20s, right? Like you're thinking about, building a family and then joining a group and belonging and individuating from your home family, right? From your family of origin. And I find a lot of these guys, they try to manufacture that family in their startup. Like they want everyone that worked for them to like be their siblings or be their children in a way, or they want their founders to be their spouses. Like a lot of these lines get crossed, and it becomes very personal for these guys because they're trying to find something that is beautiful and pure, but they're trying to find it in the wrong place.
I tell people I coach, like, you can have it all. I'm putting some air quotes here. You can have it all. It's just your own version of that, right? Like you can have a relationship, you can have kids, you can and build a business all at the same. You can do it all. You just don't fall into this comparison trap of thinking that I have to be a workaholic because so and so in social media does it. It's like, do you want to play the long game or do you want to play the short sort of burnout game, right? That's really what it's all about. You can have it all, you can do it all, but you have to just be really smart and strategic about it. And like I said before, I'm bringing this up because this is like a mantra I've been using with some of my clients is there's a price to pay for everything. Like, what do you want to do? What price do you want to pay?
And it's like, and bringing that agency into it. Because when I look at some of these guys, a lot of them, even though they're very successful, very powerful people, they feel like they don't have a choice, and they're motivated by fear. They're motivated by needing to maintain a particular lifestyle, right? Or like you said, keeping up with the Joneses, whether it's their actual neighbors or their influencers that they follow on social media. There's so much fear in the workaholic system that these guys can appear very powerful, but I think they're often like deeply, deeply afraid. I'm curious if you see that in the people that you work with.
Yes, absolutely. I think fear can be helpful in the short term. Just like the strong inner critic can be helpful real short term, right? Like a basketball coach yelling at a player, right? Super short term, boom, all right, let's go. But too much of that, too much fear, for example, that becomes your norm, right? Like I have to be vigilant and fearful all the time because if I just relax a little bit, I'm going to possibly lose everything. And again, rationally, like it's not true. Like, so you're not going to be kicked out of your country club if you're making $1 million less than some other guys. And also like no one cares. That's also the part of the illusion too, of like the insecurity. Like people are really paying attention to my accomplishments in the car I'm driving. It's like, actually, they're not. They're not going to bed like wondering, I wonder what, Marc's Lamborghini, I think he could have gotten some different wheels on that. And it's really bothering me. I'm having trouble sleeping. It's like, no, that's not happening, right? So it's like, part of this too is just like the ego that's involved. And not like a braggadocious, domineering ego, but more like the insecure ego of like, everyone's like really thinking about me and they're gonna, not be my friend because I'm not measuring up like I was, last year. It's like, really? They're worried about their own stuff. They're not worried about you, dude. Like, that's part of it too. If you can wrap your head around that, especially with the younger, like people starting up, a startup, like a 22-year-old, 25-year-old doing a startup. And like, not that many people are thinking about you, dude. Like, really, it's going to be okay. Like you're going to be accepted. People still love you. It's okay.
100%. It's okay. And I want to say to those guys, like the stuff they are judging you on, if they are, it's not your trim on your car. It's like your soft skills. I mean, stuff that like Michael and I help coach on, right? It's like, are you kind? Are you compassionate? Do you show up when it matters? Are you a man of your word? Are you honest? Right? Like those things that aren't tied to money, but like, I think it's more about how people feel when they're around you is what people are really going to pick up on. Not like, what designer suit you're wearing that particular day.
It's so easy to get caught up in the rat race or whatever you want to call it, the hamster wheel, and not zooming out and not like, that's why it's so good to take breaks or like mini vacations where you just get this perspective of like, God, that isn't that important. That thing I was worried about at work of getting the perfect software for onboarding clients or something like that. And you take a Saturday off and go hang out with your friends. You're like, who cares? Like it works. It works, 80% good enough. Like taking breaks and getting that balance in there, not only just feels good, but like it's good business sense because you get that perspective. And we all need perspective. Because when we're in the moment and stressed about something, it feels like life or death. But then you take some space from it and you're like, I was stressed out about like some business software. This is stupid, and the guys I coach, I force them to take breaks. Like I'm holding you accountable for taking this break this week, leaving early on a Friday. And it's just so hard. But then afterwards, like, God, I'm so glad I did that. Like, thank you for forcing me to do that. Like, see, sometimes you have to actually try the behavior before you understand how good it's going to make you feel. Like you can't rationally process it beforehand. You just got to go do it, right? So like take that 3-day camping trip, and you might be thinking about work almost the whole time, but then that third day it's going to click and you're going to finally relax and you go, oh, I get it. I actually had to take the time off. I had to actually treat myself with respect before I felt the benefits, before it really lined up and made sense to me. Having it in your calendar is so important, taking these breaks. That's the long game right there.
100%. Yeah. The metaphor with my guys is like sharpening the knife, and just being like you are the knife, right? You are the tool, and you need to sharpen it every once in a while. You need to figure out how to like recharge your batteries and like stay on top of your game. And that means disconnecting. That means really like taking time to make sure that you are doing what you need to do. Because a lot of guys, like you said, in the short term, they'll do it. They'll be really successful initially. I think that's the trap. I know we talked about, sports before, and I think that's common too in sports or in lifting, where when you first start, you make a lot of progress really fast, and then it plateaus. But if you're not continuing to refine your tool and doing more of an endurance sport or more of a marathon, right, like you burn out pretty quickly, right? But in the beginning, it feels really good just to like grind and get all those quick wins. But the wins, they're not as big anymore, and they're not as close together.
Well, if we take this to the business world compared with sports, very similar. You hit these plateaus. Or even in like relationships, you hit this plateau of like, hey, we're communicating great, like we're really in love or whatever it is. All these things, and understand that that's okay. Like you've reached this level of a view on the mountain, if you will, mountain path. And like drink it in, like enjoy it. Like that's a good thing. And take a little break and enjoy it. It doesn't mean you can't make it even better, but like you've arrived at a level, right? And there's certainly other levels, but like be proud of yourself. Like take a little time to enjoy it,
You brought up relationships, and it just pinged me of this very specific question I want to ask you. So I'm curious what you think about this. Mentioned a little bit earlier in the show, but when I work with these guys, their number one objection, at least initially, is how am I going to tell my wife? So that they might be bought in to slowing down, to taking breaks, to working less, maybe even taking a different placement or a different job, or maybe even retiring, and they feel so much pressure from their wives, from their kids, right? They're like, how am I going to tell her we might have to move to a different home? How am I going to tell my kids that I can't afford to put them in this private school, or that we're not going to Paris this summer? I think there's so much of this fear of disappointing others that comes into it, and we know from, a psychotherapy background, like systems theory, if one, object in the system changes, often the system will try to force that object back into homeostasis. So even if the client is on board, if the family is not on board, they're going to pressure that person to stay working, right? To stay being that provider. So I'm curious how you navigate that in your work.
I fortunately with the men I coach, I rarely see either their significant other or someone in their family that's saying work more. Rarely am I seeing. It's more the opposite, like please work less. I think for men, it's like they show their affection in a way by being that workaholic or provider, right? And they think that if they don't perform in that way, that they won't actually be loved for who they really are. And so in my coaching, what I do is it gives like the behavioral aspect. You try these experiments. You don't say, if you're uncomfortable with actually taking every Sunday off, let's start out by taking a half a Sunday off and getting feedback from your family. Like, did they disown you? Did they say you lazy, whatever? Like, try these behavioral experiments and see what happens. And 100% of the time, there's no one dies, no nothing's on fire. It's like, and then they get confident and they go, well, I'm going to take the whole weekend off, right? And they realize like, man, nothing really changed. Like, okay, interesting, right? So dipping your toe in that water and starting to get a little more balance, if you do it little by little, then at least my clients, they build that confidence and they say, God, I think this is sustainable, right? So if that helps, to answer your question, like if they're getting pressure from the family to maybe continue to work all the time, if you maybe even retrain that family system unit, like, dad's going to be taking a little time off this month for 6 hours. Then you start to kind of change that homeostasis and the whole chemistry slowly. But doing it all at once possibly could backfire. So that if your coach says you need to take a 2-week vacation in Hawaii and not bring your cell phone, right? That would actually probably backfire. And the business owner, the executive would be like, and they freak out, and then they double down on their work, right? So it's almost like training yourself in a different direction. And you're going to build that confidence when you see that the world doesn't fall apart if you treat yourself with some more self-respect and love and have that more balance in your life. So I'm a big fan of behavioral experiments, I call them.
Yeah, I'm hearing right sizing them, making sure that they're challenging enough that they're stimulating and interesting, but they're not overwhelming for your clients. Well, and to be clear, with my question, I'm curious to get you another answer of I don't think it's the family telling them to work less. What I see is it's a combination. So the family is telling them, hey, we want more of you, right? We want you to be more available with the kids. We want you to go to all the sports games, to the practices, whatever, right? But then sometimes there's financial consequences, right? Okay, if I'm going to work less, so I'm going to do less sales, for instance, then we can't do that trip to Europe this summer. And I think when things start getting smaller, sometimes the family gets really upset, right? Sometimes the partner gets upset. Sometimes the kids get upset, because there's a certain standard of living that they got used to. And, it's in a job like sales where it's say it's commission based, right? And you're choosing to scale back. You're trying not to be number one. You're trying to be top 10, Sometimes the lifestyle shifts. I think that can be really difficult, and it can feel like failing, right? It can feel like, oh, I made less money this year than last year. If this keeps going, am I going to be broke? Am I going to be poor? Do we have to sell our home? I think it brings up a lot of fear in guys.
Yeah, it can bring up a lot of fear. And it's having the courage to have those sit down, frank conversations, say with your wife or whatever. And you're just like, yeah, well, this is the deal. We're not going to be able to go to Italy this year or whatever, right? And you have to hash it out, and you have to give it a try. And again, it could just be this year I'm going to be working less. Let me see how this works for us, right? But again, I rarely have situations where the guys that I'm coaching, their wife is like, you need to work more, or it rarely happens, fortunately. But I could see it definitely happening, because you can get addicted to a certain lifestyle too. Yeah, I guess having those hard conversations with your spouse, hey, we're gonna not take that trip. We're not gonna buy that yacht or whatever, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, again, I see with a number of my guys where, like you said, the social media comparison, I think it affects the whole family. And if you're marrying somebody that is similar to you, right, and maybe has a strong inner critic of their own, then they want that constant flow of finances, right? To be able to post about that cool trip to Italy, or be able to show off their new car or whatever, right? So I think often the work has to happen on the systems level too, to realize that, as a family unit, we're going to prioritize our mental health and our physical health and our time with our children.
And ultimately, if you think about it, it comes down to experiences. So if you're on a yacht in the Mediterranean and you're hanging out, if you're there by yourself, right? Kind of boring. It's not a great experience. If you're with a bunch of people, it's a great experience. So if you think about if you're going for the experience and you scale that down to say a boat rental in South Florida, right? And you're with friends and family, you're having a great time. It's the same thing. It really is. Or, we're going to have a home cooked dinner as opposed to going and having a $1,000 meal somewhere. It's the same damn thing, right? You spent the time with people and you had that qualitative experience. So that's also something I coach around too. What kind of an experience do you want? Ultimately, do you really care about the restaurant that you went to? It's more about the whole experience, being there with people and enjoying food together, right? So yeah, that's part of it.
For sure. Yeah. And we're saying, feeling some of those things like belonging and love and connection, you can probably feel more of that at home with a home cooked meal than you can spending all the time trying to make the money to book the yacht in Milan or wherever it is.
You said earlier is like having this agency of like, if you're like the observer of the matrix what the world is, and you zoom out and you go, you know what, like I can craft the life that I want. Like I don't have to buy into all this crap, you know? Like, yeah, I love cars. So my thing is I'm gonna have a fancy car. Like I like that, not just because other people do. But having that agency of like, I can craft my own life, and I can sit down and talk to my spouse about like, let's craft our own life that we want together. And here's how we're gonna do it. And that's really powerful. You know, just saying like, this is the way I'm gonna run my life.
It is. And I want to zoom in on that, you know, because this is another kind of psychological point that I see with my guys, right? Like we mentioned earlier, the brain does the same thing, but harder. So I think a lot of these guys that are workaholics, they are good at it, right? And they like really have maximized their skill level at their job, at be it sales or business ownership or leading large teams or whatever their thing is, coding, you know, they're like really a master at that. But then when you ask them to take that away, oftentimes other parts of themselves are lagging behind, like their relational skills, right? Or their emotional literacy, or their spirituality, or their ethic, or what I think you're talking about, which I really want to ask you about, is their sense of self. You know, like I think a lot of these guys, if they're not their job, they're like, who am I? You know, or if they're not, you know, kind of stealing ideas from social media that like, oh yeah, everyone's going to Italy this year, we got to go to Italy. They never really take the time to be like, where do I want to go? Like, what do I actually want to do? If I had 3 weeks free, like what would I do? I think guys hit that void, especially the older guys in their 40s and 50s that maybe never did this, you know, it was a different generation. That never really did that soul searching and figured out who they are. They're kind of just buying into like a carbon copy, you know, modern and successful American male Barbie doll, right? They're not actually who they are. So I think that it can be really existential.
It can be, yeah. And it's thinking about like, what kind of life do I want? Right. Again, flashing forward to like that deathbed thing. I don't mean to be morbid here, but it's actually quite powerful. Like if you're there on your deathbed and you're like, I didn't do that thing that I really wanted. Maybe I wanted to play in a rock band or whatever. Or maybe I wanted to travel to this place, or I wanted to have this particular experience. I wanted to do these things. And I just was that carbon copy, the Ken doll or whatever. Right. Like that's powerful. Go to that deathbed and go like, I'm in charge of this thing. I don't have to act like everyone else. Here's the kind of life I want to have and what's really important to me. And really ultimately it comes down to like having great experiences with people that you like and love. Like that's kind of it, right? I don't know, oversimplify it, but like, right?
Basically, yeah, basically, you know, I encourage my guys to like, yeah, go back to what you like as a kid that maybe you never got a chance to do because either you didn't have the money, which you do have now, right? Or you were just dumb, right? Kids are dumb. So you're interested as a lot of stuff as a kid, but you don't have like the skills to actually learn something. So maybe you're like loved surfing, but you didn't live near the beach and you couldn't afford a surfboard and you didn't have like the discipline to like take, you know, surf classes and like make it happen. Well, guess what? In your 40s, you can do that now, right? It's about kind of going back and closing some of those loops that you had. And that is, I mean, that feels incredibly rewarding because you're finally living your life rather than someone else's.
It's one life. I mean, maybe there's reincarnation, but no one remembers the past life anyway. So it might as well be one. So like, yeah, what do you want to do, right? Do you want to be spending all your time in your business and when you could be doing other things? Again, comes down to the price you want to pay, right? Take it from here, you got to give it to there. So yeah, I mean, we're talking about really some existential stuff here, but that's existence, that's life. You can, and like I said before, like you can have it all, but it's like it's your version of having it all, right? Like, yeah, work your ass off in your business, do it, move up the executive ladder, do all that stuff, but also do it so that you're in charge, you know, and that's the way to do it, is just having that agency, I think.
Yeah, that it's not just like fear, you know, or insecurity or critics driving the boat. Like, I'm curious, what does, you know, kind of flowing from sports psychology, what does active recovery look like for the modern working man? You know, because again, I think our culture says recovery is like getting drunk, you know, or like taking a vacation that maybe you don't really enjoy or something. I think a lot of these guys don't know what a recovery is really like. And I'm curious how you've helped guys like build active recovery into their work schedule.
No, I like how you brought that into the sports, like having active recovery. So an athlete needs to recover because from the muscles and everything, and you need to do it in a way where you're still kind of moving around. Same exact thing, we'll call it in the business realm. Back to that perspective thing too. Like when you have this myopic view of what you're doing, everything becomes super ultra important, like life or death, and you're so stressed out and focused on this. And then when you take that active kind of recovery, where maybe you have a Saturday off, or you take a vacation, and you bring your laptop, you have like a working vacation, that you just get this perspective of like, let me focus on what's really important. And again, like more of a long game, like where will I, in 5 years, my life be like significantly different if I'm working 30 minutes a day less? Like probably not, right? So the active recovery, not just the physiological part, you got to recharge your sleep and your brain's working better when it's rested and better perspective, not just physiological, but like just that mental perspective you get by taking a little bit of time off is super important.
For a lot of these guys that are running at such a high clip, it's finding something that's like stimulating enough, because when I talk to some of these dudes, they're like, yeah, I can't just like sit on the beach and do nothing, right? They wig out. So it has to be something like learning a new hobby, right? Or playing golf, or picking up a art form, right? Or learning how to craft something or cook, right? I find that these guys, they need to be actively progressing because they like the idea of getting better and leveling up, and you have to kind of ratchet yourself down from like super, running on red to like, gear shifting. You can't just go from like red line to full stop. When that happens, I see that these guys get pretty depressed pretty fast, because they have that energy that needs to express themselves.
That's interesting. So like, I wonder if there is room for these guys to practice going from, 100 miles an hour down to 0, right? And like, maybe there's some value in that. And it's really hard to convince them to do that. But like, I have actually recently told this guy I was working with, very high achiever, never able to relax, like always like tense muscles, everything. Yeah, and he's always like kind of like this. And I just said, dude, get a massage. Like go get a professional massage. You and your wife go to a spa. And it's like, I said, when was the last time you had a massage? He's like, I don't think I've ever had one. And like, I've had them before, and it's a way to experience being relaxed because you're forced to it. Like if you have an hour massage, you're going to be relaxed, and they get a taste of that. They're like, oh, this feels great. But if they're going 100 miles an hour and they have to will themselves down to a relaxed state, it's like painful. They can't do it, right? It feels like dying, right? So that's why they got to stay busy. But like, if there's a way, like take a hot tub or a sauna or something like that, or massage, and you get a taste of like, oh, this is actually okay. There's some value in that too. But I hear what you're saying. Like a lot of these high achieving guys, and I have a similar thing too. Like I don't like sitting around doing nothing. Like I don't watch Netflix. Like that just bores the hell out of me. It just drives me nuts. I got to be, doing something kind of stimulating. But so to that point, like there's a lot of things you can do that, like an active recovery thing. So like cooking classes or something like that, or something where it's you're using a different part of your brain, but you're doing something interesting. I think that's valuable. And again, like, can you get the menu coach to try some absolutely 0 mile per hour stuff? And sometimes that can be a game changer. Sometimes they totally resist it, but the worst thing that happened is they hated it. Like, all right, go back to, being busy or whatever it is, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I love massages personally. And I feel like massages, spas, saunas, they work well because they're like compartmentalized, right? It's like you paid money to be there, so you got to do it, right? You're in an extremely curated environment, right? If you go to especially like a higher end spa, it's like every single thing is intentionally designed to like disconnect you, right? There's often no clocks, right? There's no talking, right? There's like no crowds, there's no lines, there's no friction, right? Like everything is designed to be like as chill as possible. You got some like wind chimes, in the background, and then it does. It works on our body to bring us down. And then to other point, like the guys that have tried the all in, right? Because I think those guys are all or nothing, right? So they're like, okay, I'm done. I'm gonna rent a cabin in the woods. I'm gonna live there for a week with nobody, right? Or like I'm gonna totally disconnect. I find that is like a detox process for a lot of these men. And what shows up are the demons, which is good information for our work because you get to see what happens. But like you said, it can feel like dying. Like people are going to see the demons, they're going to feel like they are sick sometimes physically. They're going to feel all that insecurity is going to come up, all that fear is going to come up, all the maybe like lack of self, like feeling really bored or really lost. Like you really get like a powerful dose of everything that's operating under the hood. So, I would recommend for guys listening that like, if you want to just check, are you workaholic or not? Like do something drastic, like literally get an Airbnb in a rural area for 4 days and turn off your phone. And if you lose your mind, you're probably a workaholic, right? Like you went through detox.
That's a great prescription, right? Yeah, the worst thing that happens is you're bored out of your mind, right? And yeah, I think there's so much power in just in perspective. And sometimes you do have to physically get away. Sometimes you have to, do something to get your body in that space where you're a little more relaxed. I wouldn't suggest alcohol. I would suggest a massage or something like that. But yeah, it gets back to what is the ROI on you working an extra hour today? Like, number one, you're going to pay a price. Number two, it's not going to make that much difference. Like you're already killing it at a high level. Like you're going to be fine, right? And there has to be a point where it is good enough. It's like that movie Wall Street. I'm dating myself here, but there's this famous line where Michael Douglas is asked by Charlie Sheen, it's how much is enough? How much is enough? How much is enough? And he breaks into this sort of tantrum like a child. Michael Douglas is, it's never enough, God damn it. And it's just like, wow, right? Like there's a point where it's really okay to say it's enough. It's good enough.
How do you raise a kid? Okay, because this is another question from these guys, right? Where they're hard chargers and they want their kids to be hard chargers too, right? And they're worried that their kids are not going to do it. So they're hard asses to their kids and their kids become workaholics, right? So I'm curious, like, how do you raise a child or instill that in a person, a healthy work ethic? Because there's a line here, right? Like you want to do something, so having a healthy work ethic, but not going too hard. How do you start to change the narrative around that?
I think a lot of it has to go down to allowing the celebration for your wins, feeling gratitude, getting out of this constant scarcity fear mode. Because again, you're training your brain that you only get security and dopamine and everything from constantly having the pedal to the metal. So that if you start training your brain in a different way, like I have my coaching clients, they all do morning gratitude journals, like it's mandatory. Some of them hate it, but it takes like 5 minutes and you start to train your brain to get a reward for all the work so that you're not constantly grinding. So you can really achieve at a high level. You can have really fun, like working your ass off, but at the same time, you're rewarding yourself and you're respecting yourself and you're feeling the abundance and gratitude, which sounds like airy-fairy stuff, but it's really simply brain science. You're training your brain. So like if you want to train a kid, if you will, to have a good work ethic, praise the kid, reward the kid, have some time off. And this will teach the kid like, oh yeah, I can work hard and I can enjoy myself at the same time, right? So and as an adult, you can start to train your own self this way too. And it might take a while because you've been training yourself for so long that you never get to relax. You got to be vigilant all the time. If you start to wean yourself off of that addiction, you start to get evidence that everything is going to be fine if I work a tiny bit less and actually enjoy myself and pat myself on the back and stop criticizing myself. but you have to train yourself a little slowly, and you start to believe it, and it's actually true. So yeah, train the inner child, right? So like train your own kids, absolutely, in a nice, healthy way. But like you may need to retrain yourself, dude. And it's might take a little while, but have the courage to try it. Try some experiments, and you'll realize that nothing's going to fall apart. No one's going to abandon you. And you can still work your ass off, have fun, treat it like a game, and less like life or death.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. It's like starting to change that neuronal wiring. And one principle that I took from a book, Four Disciplines of Execution, we'll put that in the show notes, listeners, but they talk about, setting up this cadence of winning, right? And they see that people that win want to win more, but you have to acknowledge it as a win, So like, if you don't acknowledge your wins, you don't want to win more. You end up having that fear motivator that we've been talking about. But it's like, if you were to say like, oh, I won, great, I want to keep winning. You can actually, it creates more motivation, more long-term and more sustainable motivation down the line. And it builds your sense of self, because now you feel like you're a confident, capable person that knows how to win.
Definitely. Reward yourself, acknowledge the wins, and then you're chasing these in a much more healthy way, as opposed to I never get to celebrate, right?
Michael, this conversation flew by. I'm curious, as our final question, it was like super fast. If anyone is inspired by this conversation, by this talk, what is one thing that they can do right away after listening to this podcast? Whether it's an exercise, introspection prompt, a resource, like what's something that an action they can take to start chipping away at this issue?
Use your calendar for accountability. Start a gratitude journal tomorrow, and buy a small journal. You can do it electronically. I prefer paper. The night before, when you go to bed, write down, I am grateful for ... and then write 1, 2, 3 on a sheet of paper. That'll take you 30 seconds. Have that queued up right on either where you're drinking your coffee in the morning or someplace where you see it. And literally the first thing you do before you check your phone, before you start worrying about all your problems and emails, is you write down 3 things you're grateful for. Doesn't have to be profound, but you're going to actually start your day intentionally thinking about how awesome you are, how awesome life is, all the things that you take for granted. You're going to look at them and you're going to go, wow, this is cool, right? And it takes that harsh edge off of grinding and working. It adds a little bit something different there. That would be the number one thing I would suggest. That gratitude takes 3 minutes. And the funny thing is, once you start doing it, you're doing it sometimes for 15 minutes. But for the high achievers out there, if you can afford 5 minutes in the morning, try it out. Because you're possibly addicted to working, you may not feel the effects of it right away. You do it for a week, you're going to start to notice, your brain will notice weird things during the day, like a bird outside the window. You're like, oh, cool. That's a nice little mini break. So that would be my prescription for anyone listening. Start a gratitude journal.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great takeaway. So yeah, where can people find you online if they want to hear more about you and follow you?
So you can just go to michaelceely.com. That's spelled Ceely. That's my coaching website. I'm all over the internet. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm Instagram, everywhere. You can just Google my name and I pop up, and happy to get in touch anyway.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again.
Mark, it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Wonderful. And listeners, we're going to have all of his links down in the show notes, so feel free to follow him. He's super active on LinkedIn. So if you're already a business dude and you just want a little dose of Michael, I think you're posting almost every day. So, follow him on that and you can kind of get that into the stream you're already reading. It's a great resource. And thank you so much for tuning in to the Men's Therapy Podcast. As you know, Men's Therapy Podcast is part of Men's Therapy Online. Website is menstherapy.online. On there, we have a ton of different podcasts, blogs. We've had Michael on before if you want to hear more from him. We also have a free Slack community full of guys that are all trying to get better. We're up to about 300 guys at the time of recording. I want to get to 1,000 by the end of the year. So join that. It's 100% free. It's an opportunity for you to connect with other guys that are doing the work, that are all trying to improve themselves and to live a better life. So there's no cost, no commitment to that. So check it out. That's at menstherapy.online/Slack. And if you want to work with us, we have individual, group, and couples counseling to work with you. So thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week, another episode of the Men's Therapy Podcast.